Time is just gone 17 minutes past 9 a.m. and it is the time of the day where we bring you the big interview. And this morning we are looking at 10 years since the Syrian uprising. Now, obviously, this uprising has turned into a full-blown war where we've seen more than 500,000 people who have been killed. Millions have been forced to flee their homes, those that have been internally, externally displaced, and we've seen millions of refugees right across the entire world. And while the world has been focusing in the last year on the pandemic, on COVID-19, looking at numbers, looking at statistics, but these statistics from Syria speak volumes. They speak volumes on their own, where we talk about more than 500,000 people that have been killed in a single country. And this morning, we joined on the line by Ibtihal Bsis, a barrister joining us from the United Kingdom. Sister Ibtihal, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair for inviting me.
Yes, Jazakallah to you as well. And sadly, we are talking 10 years of a crisis of mammoth proportions, a crisis that has just caused death, destruction, despair, desperation, poverty, homelessness, you name it. And all of that in a nutshell is encompassed in the Syrian conflict, Sister Ibtihal.
Yes, indeed. I mean, I did an interview last year, and it was called Syria 9 Years On, and I didn't have hope at that time. Of course, there's always hope in Allah, but I didn't have hope that it would come to an end. And we're 10 years here, and here we are. I mean, the situation has got worse since last year, since the beginning. Excuse me. Since the beginning, you'll remember that this happened at the hands of about 15 children between the ages of 10 and 15 in the farming town in Daraa on the border with Jordan. That memory of those children who graffitied on the walls of their school, "Al-Sha'b yurid asqat al-nidam," the people want the downfall of the regime. We can see now that their memory in some ways has been desecrated because of what Bashar al-Assad is doing, because of what Russia is doing, because of what Hezbollah is doing, killing people, killing children, forcing people to join the army and kill their brothers and sisters. It's absolutely disgraceful. And this is all under the West's watch. Where is the international countries? Where is international law? Where is the United Nations? It's all just speak. And effectively what's happening is that we're all sleeping with the screams and the torture and the humiliation and the death and the desecration of our ummah in Syria. And this is exactly what's happening now. And it's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking.
Well, it certainly is, because what actually started off as a popular uprising has quickly turned into a full-blown war. And we know there are many agendas that are playing out. There are many interests of many countries that are playing out. But at this point in time, 10 years later, we still see Bashar al-Assad firmly entrenched with power.
I can tell you, I was there the first year. I started traveling there since 2004. My husband is actually Syrian, and I continued to travel there until 2014 when the warplanes were coming. I remember it very vividly. For the first 2 years, things were going fairly well because I think the international community were hoping that that Bashar al-Assad would win. It was only actually a matter of days before he would be toppled, just as Gaddafi was. And look what's happened when the international community got involved there, the mess it was. And in fact, in Yemen, you can see what's happened there. Egypt, we can see what's happened there. And Syria is still fighting. The revolutionaries are still fighting. Incidentally, it is not war. It is not war, because when you think of war, you think of two people that have the same artillery, that have the same number of men, that have the same number of supporters. And it is really just a people who don't have the artillery, that don't have Russia on their sides or Hezbollah on their sides. The odds are against them. What it is state terrorism, and it's more than one state. The Russians there are committing atrocities. There's a man by the name of Ismail I was reading this morning, who was hit over the head with a sledgehammer by some Russian military. Then they dismembered his body. I'm sorry to say this first thing in the morning to your viewers. It's really heartbreaking. They dismembered his body and then decapitated him. Whatever was left of his body was hung up, and then they set him on fire. Sisters and brothers, this is happening without any impunity, and no one is holding these people to account. I understand that his brother has now made a complaint to the Russian courts. We think that's laughable. We know it's laughable. He knows it's laughable. Putin is going to ignore that, and he is ignoring that. And these states are doing this under America's watch. This is the superpower. We will remember when there were atrocities, when there was Islam. We will remember that it was the Spaniards that asked the caliphate. I think it was, I can't remember which Khalif it was. It may have been Umar ibn Khattab, I'm not sure. It was the Spaniards that asked the Khilafah at the time to come and help them when their ruler, Roderick, was torturing them and humiliating them. And we did. I think it's the only time in history that a state has been asked to come and save the people, and they did. Now, the Syrians have asked a number of times for the international community, but they've given up now because we can see America has actually done the opposite of that. And we can continue to cry ISIS, and we can continue to cry terrorist group, but the real terrorists we know on the ground are Bashar al-Assad, are Putin and Hezbollah. These are the terrorists, and America and the rest of the world that are complicit because they stand by and they watch it happen without lifting a finger. Because we know that they want Bashar al-Assad in power. They don't want us to take our own destiny, our own political destiny into our own hands, because that would mean that we may rise up as a superpower against them.
So, Ibtihal, I'm just trying to wrap my mind around why they would want Bashar al-Assad in power, and why was he not treated in the same way that Muammar Gaddafi or even Saddam Hussein were treated and taken out?
Well, the problem that they have is they have no one to replace him, because we can see in Libya, there's no one there to replace. There's war at the moment. Gaddafi, I mean, Libya, I'm actually Libyan. Libya is split into two. I can't go there either. The last time I visited was in 2018. And after that, that was it. But they can't get anyone that will replace him that the people will accept. So what they'll do is they'll punish the people for an uprising. Of course, he's a puppet, but because his father, Hafez al-Assad, was a puppet of the American people. I remember hearing a telephone call between him and Ronald Reagan, Hafez al-Assad, his father, Ronald Reagan congratulating themselves on how well they're doing. Hafez al-Assad was also a terrorist, but we know that he committed the biggest, they say one of the biggest genocide. He's been overtaken by his son now, that the people had ever heard of. He killed 50,000 people of his own people in one weekend in Hama. This is a man who says, Ya Allah, hallak, hallak, khalli, Hafez fi mahallak. He made people protest, Ya Allah, your time is up. Let Hafez take your place. This is the kind of butchers that are now in charge of our countries. They rule us, although we do not want them. And they talk about democracy in their states, in the United States of America and the UK. And yet they allow dictators to do this to people. We are not humans to them. We are less than, I mean, they take better care of their dogs and cats. We are nothing to them. So we know full well that America is at play here. When Obama came out and said that the time for the Egyptian president Mubarak, who's now dead, the time for him is up, he was actually deposed the very next day. We know that these leaders come and go as and when they are told to come and go by the powers that be.
Yes. Now, obviously you mentioned your husband is Syrian, and you've been there. So you've got basically first-hand experience from a family perspective in terms of what is actually taking place on the ground. And for a few minutes, I want to focus on the women and the children, because, this is a very, very difficult part, because, last week, I think we celebrated International Women's Day. And when one talks about women and children, and women that in particular that have suffered tremendously as a result and are still suffering in the last 10 years.
I think my sighing says enough. I really don't know where to start, brother. A lot of the women that I visited in those camps, in those areas, have now disappeared. A lot of them no longer have their husbands or their sons. I remember one particular story of a woman who Bashar al-Assad's gangsters turned up, military turned up, and they started indiscriminately shooting, and she had her neighbor's son at the time. Now, his parents were shot in front of him, and then he was shot in the chest, but still breathing. And they had to move on. So he begged her to carry him to the next camp. I remember she had 2 children with her, and she carried this poor boy on her back for I don't know how many hundreds of miles. During the journey, of course, he passed away. I don't know what happens to people, how broken they will be. We can see what coronavirus has done here. The mental illness, I think there are more than 70 million prescriptions for antidepressants in the UK alone, even though there are 64 million people here. There's 70 million prescriptions. So many people have had that double and triple. They worry about a virus. But I will say this, even though these people have seen death and destruction and humiliation and torture and famine and disease and anything, they will say to you that coronavirus is nothing. They are not broken. They are sad. They don't have homes, they don't have family, but they have their faith in Allah. And I can see that coronavirus has broken people here in these countries. And I often think, what if they had to go through war? What if they had to go through what the Syrians had to go through? They would annihilate themselves within days. These people continue to struggle, they continue to strive, they continue to scream out for Allah's help, which inshallah will be coming, because no one else seems to want to help them. And it really is absolutely heartbreaking when I think of how they've all become scattered. How can you be refugees in your own country? We're all scattered. I'm in the UK, parts of my family are elsewhere. And this is just a typical story of a Muslim family. We cannot live in our own lands because of these butchers, because of these terrorists, because of these Western-backed men that continue to kill us and humiliate us. And it's absolutely heartbreaking what's happening. And this is not how the vision of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam or the vision of the Khulafa that came after him. I don't know what they would make of it now. But subhanallah, regardless of that, we continue, of course, to pray for them, to give charity, to help in any way we can. But most of all, we must be the voices for them and tell people about the stories that we hear about them and hold our governments to account. Because quite frankly, we know that the international community is not going to do anything.
Well, for you personally, Sister Ibtihal, obviously, of Libyan descent. So you've seen a lot in Libya, in terms of yourself, your family in Libya. On the other hand, being married to a Syrian, you see what has happened on the other side in Syria as well. And also, I think over the years where you lived in a country like France and living in the UK. So basically, the Islamophobia that's manifesting itself. So basically, you've got such an all-round view as to what is happening within Muslim countries and outside of Muslim countries as well.
Yes, indeed. And I mean, my husband's family live there, and just to tell you a little bit of the strength that they have, I have a mother-in-law who's 80 plus now. She has seen everything and had her house bombed twice. She's now living somewhere else. She lived in the field for 6 months because they were bombing the part of Idlib that she was in. And every time I ring her and ask, how are you? She says immediately, Alhamdulillah. And then she asks about my health, my children's health. It's the same with my family in Libya. I remember walking out and hearing gunfire. And they act like they cannot hear it. It's become so normal for them. And death is only a heartbeat away as far as they're concerned, because they are very close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the other thing that struck me about them. And I think really, sisters and brothers, when we look around the world, and yes, you're right, I've seen a lot of the West. I was in France when they were banning the hijab. Now they banned the niqab, and they say to people, you have to wear a mask, but if you wear a niqab, you're committing a crime. None of it makes sense. And the West is beginning to expose itself with its own hand, with its own mouth. The world is not a very nice place, far from it. We feel homeless. The Islamophobia is rife. Syrians are treated as refugees in their countries, but they're treated very badly here, bullied. A lot of them haven't even been invited to the West in any event. Britain has taken on very few of them. Our Home Office Minister at the moment is so in cahoots with Israel, and is so against Muslims anyway. There's a prevent strategy here that looks at whether young Muslim children as young as 2 can become tomorrow's terrorists, and it's a very heavy-handed strategy that they have here. This is the world we live in as Muslims. And it's time for us to really wake up to the fact, and it's time for us to really understand what is happening to us, because we can't pretend that it's not happening. As long as it's not happening to me, it's not happening. That's not allowed for us as Muslims. We are one ummah after all. So I encourage sisters and brothers to become aware of the plight of Muslims wherever they are, whether it be in France, in America, and Britain, or Syria, Yemen, or Libya. We are suffering and struggling wherever we are. But our Muslims are struggling much more back home. And we have to raise awareness about it. We have to speak out about it. It's no good for us to just try and get what we can of this dunya and hope for the best. It's not enough. It's not acceptable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's just not.
Yes, and just finally, Sister Ibtihal, we're about a month away from the month of Ramadan, and I always use this yardstick looking at where we are as a Muslim Ummah from one Ramadan to the next. And obviously, this Ramadan is no different. Possibly, it could be even worse compared to the previous Ramadan. But at the end of the day, it is hope. It is about hope in the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also looking at it from a religious perspective, from our belief system. And I think this is what is keeping many people who are in these conflict zones going, is the hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When one looks at the Palestinians, we know that we are living in difficult times, but these are also signs of the end times as well. And we know what will happen in Palestine. We know what is going to happen in Damascus, as a sign of Qiyamah, and looking at the end times. And I suppose these are the issues that are keeping people going and also giving them hope.
Yes, there's always, as I say, hope in Allah. We have to have that hope in Allah. But when we look at what's happening, I mean, there are people already fasting, brother, 24 hours a day. If you look at the hunger that's hit the refugee camps, let alone inside of Syria, and these are babies whose mothers do not have any milk, do not produce any more milk, or mothers that are being tortured while they're 9 months pregnant. I've heard firsthand about these sort of things, and lose their babies. It's another Ramadan, and then you have the UAE, which will celebrate Ramadan, but they're in cahoots with.
Sorry, Sister Ibtihal, we just lost a bit of volume.
Yes, just bear with me.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm sorry about that. They are in cahoots in Israel. They've set up diplomatic relations which are open. They're building a synagogue now, apparently, and Israelis are coming to our land whilst they're torturing Palestinians. We know what's happening in Gaza. We know what's happening to our ummah there, and it really is. Yes, it's bittersweet, isn't it? We celebrate, we look forward to Ramadan, but we know every Ramadan that comes is worse than the one before that. So we have to, on this Ramadan, really not just give in charity, not just give hope in the terms of making dua, but really beseech Allah that He gives us the victory soon as an ummah. And really talk about these issues during Ramadan. Don't just talk about zikr. And, having zikr is remembering that we are one ummah. And this is what Allah wanted us to be. Understanding our history, understanding that we were the best people. We are the best people. تُخْرُجُوا لِلنَّاسِ, and that you come out to the people. And it really is heartbreaking understanding that we have another Ramadan and the situation of the ummah has got worse. It will continue to get worse. They will continue to annihilate us. They will continue to humiliate us. And they will continue to treat us like that brother Ismail, whose body, which was headless and limbless, was hung up and set alight. Do we really want to continue like that? Do we really want to be humiliated like that? Can we sleep at night knowing that this is happening to our ummah? I don't think we can. So let's do something about it. Let's speak up. Let's speak up about it. Jazakallah khair, brother.
Jazakallah to you as well, Sister Ibtihal. As always, for your time, Allah accept, Allah reward your efforts as well, and Allah grant you the strength to continue the good work that you are doing, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu wa rahmatullah. Barakallah feek, brother.
That was Ibtihal Bsis, barrister, joining us out of the United Kingdom this morning, looking at 10 years of the Syrian conflict.